Alrighty. I think to open some things up, I think just to go back to the last ball game, clearly the first half of that game was not the competitive football that I know we're capable of playing. And when you really break it down in the first half and then in totality the game, the turnovers were very difficult to overcome. 4 turnovers in the game, 3 in the first half, 2 of which came late in the second quarter, which really turned the table. We're talking about a 14-14 all game that ultimately flips itself to 35-14 at the end of the first half. I was impressed with our guys and their ability to come back and fight in the second half, ultimately outscore them 35-14 in the second half, and then put ourselves in position to get to overtime. And you get to overtime, now you're talking about one-play games. And obviously they made the play on the 2-point play. We weren't able to make it. And, you put yourself in that position because of the way we played in the first half. So I don't think that I'm stating anything that isn't kind of the obvious to what happened in the ball game. Now, what happened? Obviously the turnovers on offense were killers because I thought we moved the ball well in the game. But the turnovers, I've never been part of a game where you lose the turnover battle 4-0 and you win. I mean, the odds are over 90% the team that wins that turnover battle is going to win the ball game. So clearly the ball is an issue. Clearly our inability to stop the run effectively on defense and then our inability to get off the field on third down on defense became the bigger issues with them possessing the football in the game and having extended drives and taking advantage of that. So, on that aspect of it, clearly we've got things to work on. A couple things from an injury standpoint. Bijan had a dislocated elbow, so he'll be out the remainder of the season. Josh Thompson has a fractured fibula, so he'll be out the remainder of the season. And Jonathan Brooks has a shoulder injury that's really going to have him week to week. We'll see how it goes if we can get him back before the end of the season. I think big picture-wise for us, the first thing is we have to control what we can control. And that is our preparation and our focus on West Virginia for this ball game this weekend. Clearly, everybody's upset. We're upset. Everybody feels the frustration in what has occurred. But I can assure you, nobody's more upset, nobody's more frustrated than we are in the performance because we put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of work not to play the football that is the standard here at the University of Texas. And so that's directly on me, and it's my job to get our players prepared to play and to put them in the right mental frame of mind and the right physical frame of mind and the right position on game day to ultimately go perform. And then that onus then goes to the players to go do that. So, we've got our work cut out for us on that end. Obviously, we've got a few depth issues that have popped up now that we've got to navigate our way through. But that's football. That's football in November. You got to find your way through it, and you got to field your team and put your team in the best position to have success. And that's what we can control, and that's what we'll control this week against West Virginia.
Raise your hand if you have a question. We'll get a mic to you. Start on the far right with Terry.
Good morning to you, Coach Sarkisian.
Good morning.
Coach, a couple years ago, one of my good friends and I were faced with a massive problem we couldn't solve. And in his wisdom, he said, at this point, we need to stop and ask ourselves, what would an extraordinary person do in this situation? And this resonated with me the whole weekend. And I realized that of all the coaches who could be standing at that podium right now in those shoes, you are that extraordinary person. And you have a team of what I call coaching juggernauts. This is not only my opinion, this is a fact. I don't think anyone could dispute this. So my question as we write, the Sarkisian era story, we're not even done with the first chapter yet. Can you unfold some of the onion of what are you working on? How are you solving this problem? I realize that you might not even know, but I want to steal from Julian Edelman. It's going to be one hell of a story.
Yeah, I think first of all, one, when you take this job, and I've said this before, but I think now is a pertinent time to say it. One, you have to know what you sign up for. You don't take the job at the University of Texas without some expectation of scrutiny, without some expectation. There's a reason I got hired. There's a reason there was a coaching change. So clearly, you have to understand, A, there's some things that are in there that I have to figure out and get that done. Two, it might not just be smooth sailing, right, all the way. There's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be rocky waters that we're going to have to navigate our way through. And three, you got to recognize through those times there's going to be scrutiny. And that starts with me, our staff, and then ultimately our players. Whether it's deserving or not, that's the arena that I put myself in, and you have to recognize that. So I'm very comfortable understanding kind of where I stand and what the responsibilities are of what I have to do. With all that being said, sometimes through the struggle, which clearly we're in the midst of, you start to get a little bit more clarity on maybe some of the issues that if we had found a way to win some of these fourth quarter games, if we had found a way to win this game in overtime, sometimes those issues kind of get masked over with winning because sometimes winning can kind of cure it all. And one of mentors of mine always told me, playing bad and winning is sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you because you don't address the issues that you have on your team. We, unfortunately, have lost a lot of close games, so it continues to present issues to us that we have to address. And as we go through that process, that's why you try to hire a great staff, which I believe we have, and we navigate our way through it, whether it's one player at a time, one scheme at a time, recruiting, portal, all these things that kind of come across our plate that we're trying to navigate to making sure that we're doing what's in the best interest of the University of Texas and the football program. And so I'll say it again, when I got hired, I'm honored, I'm humbled to be the head football coach at the University of Texas. With that is a lot of responsibility. That's okay. I signed up for it. I know what it is. And, we've got clearly work to do, and we won't stop until we get to the end of the story, which should be a great story. I believe that to be true as well.
Over here on your left, Brian.
Steve, with signing day 1 month away from today, has anyone in administrative circles told you that you need to make staff changes, or are you prepared to say that this staff will return intact?
No one's told me that at all. When I got hired, I give our administration a lot of credit. They gave me the resources to go hire what I opinion was arguably the best staff in the country, if not one of the top staffs in the country. These guys didn't forget to coach overnight. They've been doing it for a long time at a very high level. They're championship caliber coaches. They've developed NFL players. They've developed All-Americans, All-Conference players. They've competed for championships. They've won championships, whether it's at the college ranks or in the NFL. So I've got a lot of belief in our staff. But hear me when I say this, and this isn't a negative. When the season comes to an end, I evaluate everything in our program. And you ultimately do what's in the best interest of the university and the program. And that's not to say I'm going to evaluate nutrition, strength and conditioning, practice, our format, our schemes, our coaches, our players. That's all encompassing, and that's part of the job to do that. But no, I have not been told that I need to make changes.
When you have guys that aren't following consistently those things you talked about on the wall, the accountability and those type of things, what is your plan to get them there? And when you're 10 games deep into the year, how can you make changes that will go into effect immediately with some of those guys?
Well, I think a couple things. One thing I've been trying to do is really kind of categorize our players. Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, from are they doing these things that we're asking of them, and how consistently they're doing that. And clearly, you want every player to be in Group 1, right? All in, totally committed to what we're doing. And we've got a fair amount of guys on our team that I believe are there and give us all that they have, everything that every day that we go, on or off the field. We've probably got a fair share of guys in Group 2 that are still trying to figure it out, and we've got a few guys in Group 3, quite frankly, that really don't know, that are wondering if this is for them. And all of that, like I've said before, is okay. My job is to continually try to bring those guys up one level, to the next level, to the next level. And to me, that's called leadership. That's called motivation. And to do that, you can't discount where we're at now. We want to finish this season extremely strong. We want to play a great game on Saturday. We want to go then come back for the day after Thanksgiving against Kansas State and do that. And then when it comes time for the offseason, then we can continue to move forward on the path that we're on. So, I think it's part of the process, it really is, of just how do you get more guys to be in that group one level that become real leaders on your team. And they don't have to be frontline starters, but the more commonality, right, like-minded individuals, that will draw more people to that. And so we're continuing to work on that to try to make that really come to life and be one of the strengths of our program.
In the middle, Ed.
Coach, for 5 games in a row, it looks like the defense has been confused. They've been gutted for 5 weeks in a row. When you look at the film with the defensive coaches, is it the personnel or is it the scheme you're running that has caused this debacle the last 5 weeks on the defensive side?
Yeah, I think it's been frustrating for everybody. And I'm not, you have to answer the question, so I'm not here to make excuses, but I do need to answer the question to be fair. I think, one, to be fair to our players, this is their 3rd consecutive year in a new defensive scheme. So there's a little bit of lack of continuity for them of calls, how we play plays, zone coverage drops, how do we match certain routes, the pressure packages, all of those things. And when you have consistency in a scheme, like we've played some teams here, not necessarily last week, but previous to that, who have been in the same system over time, and they're a veteran unit, now they're working really well together almost subconsciously. They already know what the next guy's going to do. The adjustment's really quickly made. We're still in the phase of we're trying to keep getting things taught, and we try to practice the look that we think we're going to get, but all of a sudden we get a little different formation or a different motion or a little different way to run a play, and now there's a little bit of hesitation on our part. I'll be honest with you. We're hesitating and not fitting things the way we're capable of fitting them. So that's the race for us, right? How do we get to a point to where everybody is so comfortable in the system and in the scheme that they can really play to their capability? And so, I think that's part of it for our staff. I think that clearly, we're frustrated that we're not playing the way that we think we're capable of playing. But part of it is we got to get our guys to really feel and understand the scheme and work hand in hand with one another, and we're just not quite there yet.
Over here on your far left, Cedric.
Hey, Steve, while you're trying to figure out what group these guys are in, 2, 3, how difficult is that when you're trying to navigate through a 5-game losing streak?
I've never said my job would be easy. I think being a head football coach is a tough job, but it's one that when you are one, you embrace it and you love the role and you love the opportunity. And we wear a lot of hats. Obviously I wear a lot of hats as a head football coach, from really a general manager standpoint to a head coach to a mentor to a leader to an offensive play caller. That's just part of the job. And so is it a little bit difficult? Sure. But that's part of the job. My part is to evaluate our team on a daily basis, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, to gauge where every player is at. And that's what I'll continue to do, and I've been doing, and that's what I'll continue to do through the remainder of the season.
On your right, Roger.
Sark, quickie, as Keelan cleared protocol, and then a little longer one, attrition, whether it's recruiting classes, whether it's transfers, injuries, when you're trying to build something, how much does that play into it and maybe challenge you?
Sure. Keelan should clear protocol tomorrow, which clearly is much needed. We need to get a little bit of depth back at that spot with some of the injuries. Attrition, for me, it's part of college football. When I assessed this job coming in, I noticed there was probably more attrition here than there were kind of normally. So I kind of saw what it would look like. Obviously, we're kind of feeling the effects of that. I think from the 2018 and 2019 recruiting classes, I think 50% of those players are no longer with our program for whatever reasons. They transferred, medically disqualified, NFL. Those guys aren't here. Those would be our juniors and seniors on our roster. I think overall, in totality, the last 4 recruiting classes, I think we're well into the 30% range of those players that signed here are no longer on our roster. So you deal with those issues. You deal with how do you develop the players, how do you get the depth back on your roster that you're looking for, whether that's through recruiting, whether that's through the transfer portal, to try to make sure that you've got the right depth. Clearly, we didn't have any outside linebackers on our roster returning from last year's team. We went to the portal, we signed Ray Thornton, we signed Ovi, we signed Ben Davis just to try to get some depth back on the roster. And so you're always trying to navigate those things. Clearly, in my opinion, the best teams over time are veteran-laden teams. They've got juniors and seniors on their team. They're experienced players. If you look around our conference, the teams that are playing well, look at the players that are playing for them. They're juniors and seniors on their team. We don't quite have that luxury right now, which is okay. Our job is to develop the younger players on our team to make sure that they're getting in position to play. One thing that was unfortunate for us last week, with some of the injuries, we got hit with the flu. It happens. We had 25 guys out in Tuesday's practice. So you got to navigate it, and you got to do what you can to make sure you get your team in position to perform. So, hey, you get dealt the hand you're dealt, and then you got to play that hand. And so we're rapidly trying to increase this roster to get it back to where we want. We're trying to develop our players so that in time we become that veteran team. Unfortunately, right now, we're just not that team.
In the middle, Dennis.
Coach, you're talking about attrition, talent, depth, cohesion, all of it's real. Are you starting to see that it might take a little bit to get this program where you want it?
I think, the reality of it is things take time. I'm probably as impatient as anybody else. We all want it to happen quicker rather than later. And so that's the race, right? I mean, everyone says this thing is, you talk to coaches, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But I'm of the adage, why can't you sprint a marathon? What would it look like if we can get there quicker than the expectation is? And so, that's what we do every day. That's why we work the way we work. That's why we recruit the way we recruit. That's why we try to develop our players as men the way that we do, so that when we do break through, as I've been talking about, we've got everything in place to really charge forward and do it for a long time.
Over here on your left, Kurt.
Yes, Steve, I wonder if you anticipate considerable roster turnover and expect more transfers? And a second part is, do you feel like you need to get more involved in the defense and being play caller and head coach?
Two good questions. I think one, I'm looking at the way this thing is shaping up and some of the new NCAA rules. I could easily see us with 33 new scholarship players on our team by next fall, which when you look at a number of 85 total, 33 will be new players next fall. More than a third of our roster will be new, and that's the nature of the business that we're in. Obviously, the transfer portal and the NCAA has provided that for players to go and do that. Clearly we have to find the right balance into how much we interact in the portal as opposed to how much we dive into recruiting really good young players out of high school and then developing them over time so that you have sustainability on your roster. The fact is, you think about 33 new scholarship players, kicking off the season next year. That's a pretty big number, considering, what normally it would look like when a lot of teams are in that 20 to 25 range right in there. So pretty big number, but that's part of the process. I think from a defensive perspective, I would envision that happening, especially as we move into the offseason. I felt like it was so important to get us kind of settled down. I had to focus in on what we were doing offensively, big picture as a team. We've got great experience on our defensive staff with PK, Bo Davis, Jeff Choate. These guys have been doing it a long time at a high level. But I do think I have some real experience and expertise in coaching football where I can add some value to what we're installing, how we're coaching it, and how to play some of the plays that now I'm getting used to our conference of how people are attacking us and maybe a different way to defend things.
Probably in the offseason.
Of course. Yes, sir.
On your right, Onward.
Coach, Casey threw a touchdown pass, and then you benched him for Hudson. So I'm kind of curious as to what went into that thought process. And the second part of the question is, Casey finishes with 7 touchdowns, 6 passing, and he leads the Big 12 in total touchdown passes. So what more does it take for him to be your undeniable, number one guy? Yeah,
I didn't bench Casey in the game. That was the plan going in, and they were very aware of what that plan was. I thought I had actually shared it with you guys. I'm not certain, but if I didn't, I apologize.
You did.
I apologize.
Word wrong. I worded it wrong.
So the idea going into the game was Casey was going to play the first 2 series of the game. and then Hudson was going to come in the third series, and then we were going to monitor it from there. Obviously Casey gets the touchdown. I thought Hudson actually had a nice drive for his. Unfortunately for Hud, 2 turnovers in there in those drives. And so at that point, it was okay, we're going to go back to Casey. Casey competed his tail off, played extremely well. Obviously, going into this week's game, Casey's going to be our starting quarterback. I think ultimately we can identify Casey, but I think it's kind of he's a microcosm of the entire roster. It's about consistency, and it's about playing with consistency at whatever our role is on our football team for any player. And I think ultimately for us as a team, the one thing I want to get done here in the final 2 ball games is I want to see us play a complete football game in all 3 phases. I look back to the Iowa State game. I thought our defense played really well the first half of that game. Unfortunately, we did not play great offensive football, and we only have a 7-3 lead when potentially we could have had a 17-3 lead. That could have changed the complexion of that game. Then the second half comes, they hit the 2 big plays, away we go. This Saturday comes, obviously we move the ball well, the turnovers occur, we don't play great defense this Saturday. So at what point are we going to be able to put all 3 phases together and play a complete game of football with consistency across the board?
Over here on your left, Danny.
Steve, can you reflect at all on Bijan's season, and then also, is there a chance that Jordan plays in these next 2 games?
I'll hit Jordan first. I think there is a chance Jordan Whittington can play this weekend. We'll monitor that. I mean, it'd be great to have Jordan back. I mean, he's an exceptional football player. 2, he's a great leader on our football team, and he's been one since the day I arrived. This guy's been tremendous for us. So if we can get him back, that would be great. Bijan, I've said all along who he represents as a human being, as a person, is even better than what everybody gets to see on Saturday on the field. This guy embodies what a true champion looks like. He's a tremendous teammate. He's a great leader. He's got unbelievable work ethic. And, oh, by the way, he's really talented. And I think we saw all of that here, for the first 10 games of the season. Yeah, he's a warrior. He wants the ball. He wants the opportunities to get the ball in his hands, whether it's in the run game, the pass game. We want him to get healthy and get himself back, because I think he's primed for a big-time junior season.
Got one last one, Brian, up front.
Going back to Kirk's question about a roster turnover, I'm curious about roster makeup. Is it, I don't want to say that nothing's easy with this, but getting more offensive and defensive linemen and bolstering the trenches, would that calm a lot of issues if you just get solid blockers and tacklers up front and then build from there?
I think so. Now, I think at the end of the day, football's won up front. I mean, when you look, I don't care if it's Little League football, high school, college, NFL, the teams that are there at the end, they are really good up front. And this week's no different when you look around. I mean, this year's no different when you look around college football. The teams that are kind of in this mix for the college football playoff, they're really good fronts. They're good defensive fronts. They're good offensive fronts. They can control the game for you. And that's something I've said since day one when I got here. That would be a point of emphasis of ours from a recruiting standpoint. Not to discount. You got to have your playmakers. You got to have the guys that can score touchdowns and throw the ball and cover routes and all that. But the game of football is still a physical sport. As much as, 7-on-7 and all these things have become bigger and bigger issues and things going on out there, this is still an in the trenches game. And when you can win the line of scrimmage, you bolster your chances of winning football games. And so clearly, yeah, and I think we're doing a heck of a job recruiting that. And then once you recruit it, then you have to develop that talent so that they can become mainstays in your program over an extended period of time. I think one of the concerns with that is, it's like anything. Everybody wants to win signing day, and everybody wants to say our class was ranked this or that in the country. Then all of a sudden the expectation is those guys are going to walk in the door and be frontline starters for you, which they may, but they have to earn it, because if we can keep the guys here that are good players for us, which is the plan, they're just more mature. They're more physical. They've been in a college weightlifting program. They're becoming grown men. They have more experience of either blocking or taking on blocks. And so that's the fine line in there of when talent and or experience and how you weigh those two and how you can bring those two together.